Welcome everybody. It's great to have everyone from Sparx Systems YouTube channel join us today. My name's Scott. I'm joined by Stephen, and today I understand we're having a look at web models. So I'm really keen to find out what web models are. So welcome Stephen, and what can you tell me about web models?
Thanks for the introduction, Scott. I'm always glad to be here and sharing knowledge. Yes, we are going to be looking at web modeling. So we're going to change our focus a little bit from the kind of models we've done recently, which have been more analysis models and strategic models. But in a way, these are a kind of analysis model, but on a more technical level. So let's take a dive into this. And as always, we look at setting our perspective. So this morning, I've been working on some business rule models, and I want to change my perspective to this group here, which allows me the perspective set analysis perspectives, which contain a large range of different types of modeling and framework. But I'm going to choose the web models one there, and I click that one. The tool does its magic and changes the application interface to being into a web modeling tool. So as always, Scott, we have got some patterns here, but I want to do this from first principles. We have a simple Java JSP model there. I'm going to close that now and work from first principles. The first thing I need to do is to get a location for this in the browser. So I'm going to choose the package analysis models, and we're going to put a package in here, and we'll call it web models. Okay. So let's do that, and the tool creates that that for us. And let's have a look at the kind of things that we want to put into this model. We want to talk about our servers in particular, you know, authenticating people and preferences. So let's put a diagram in here called web modeling. There you see that pops up automatically for us. That's the only thing we can select. Makes it very easy. Let's call it server or client and server side preferences. So this is an important part of the urban parking meter system, where people can set their preferences, you know, what type of notification they want to get, whether they want a text message, an email, a phone call, all sorts of different things about their preferences, the kind of parking facilities that they want to be able to register for. So let's go and create that diagram. And you can see now that Enterprise Architect is, as always, presented us with a blank canvas where we can start our modeling. And the toolbox contains two pages, web modeling elements. So these things will come onto the diagram as kind of rectangular types of elements. And we've also got these relationships, which will be the lines or the connectors that we draw between things. So let's make a start, and let's start from, let's start from the front end of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on a server or a node. So we'll choose a node in this case. We'll drop the node onto the diagram canvas. You see it comes in a particular shape. I'm going to predict that I'm going to be putting some things inside this node. So I use the very convenient method of just making this a little bit larger. And I'm going to call this node the client machine. So we're not going to be specific about what type of machine someone's using. We don't know whether they're sitting at their desk, a desktop machine, or in on a notebook computer. So we'll do that. And the next thing we're going to do is say, look, all this is going to be happening via the internet. So let's put a web page on here, and that will come through. Actually, let's put a component first, Scott. I'll just delete that one. You can see how easy it is if you change your mind about something. I can just simply delete that from the application. I'm going to put on a component here, and that component is going to be a web browser.
Now, I noticed in the browser on the left there, it's almost as though the web browser is embedded in the element above. So,
yeah.
Does that relationship get captured within Enterprise Architect?
Yeah, so Scott, that is there. You can see that what I've done is I've put that web browser inside the client machine, and as you say, on the side of the browser, when we're looking at it, it's showing that that's a nested relationship, or that the client machine contains that web browser. And that makes perfect sense. You know, you don't have a web browser by itself floating around. It's going to be loaded on a client machine. And as I said, we don't know exactly what type of machine that one is. But let's go in here now and put in a web page in here. So this is the page that someone's going to be looking at to set their preferences. Let's again conveniently choose the web page from the toolbox and drop it on there. And let's call this preferences.html. So that's obviously a universal extension for that. And you can see that it's got a number of little icons there that show us that it's a web page. And over in the properties window, it's got on the element tab of the element panel of the properties window, you can see that it's of type web page, and it has a stereotype, and I'll expand that so you can see that, of web page. But the name of it is, I made a mistake there, preference.html. I put preferences.html. Notice I changed it in the properties window and it updates automatically in the diagram. And as you pointed out before, this is contained inside that web browser. So that's where we're going to put that. Now, we've got some other elements that we might put in here. Let's put this element in here. It's a client page, and we could put another type of element. Let's do that though for the moment. We'll put in another page here. Let's just choose something. We'll put in a web page, because effectively that's what it is, and that's going to be the CSS that's going to be within that. So we can put that in there. We could specialize the toolbox if we wanted to create a particular type that's, you know, called CSS if we wanted to. But I think everyone will get the meaning of that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a client page there, I think, and let's have a look at that. And it's going to be a JavaScript object, client script object. So let's look in this and say we want to put in a client script object. We'll put that in there and we'll give it a name. And this can be the JavaScript that's running this validation and preferences. Let's use some of our facilities in the tool to make these guys the same height and width. And you can see what's happened here. This client machine one object here has got some extra prefixes to it. So let's turn that off and say that in the diagrams we don't want to show fully scoped object names. And so you can see that will now disappear. So quite a useful thing to just to turn that off. It's just a property in the browser. We can make these the same height. We can put them like that as well. So now you can see that we've got that all lined up nicely. And don't worry about lining things up perfectly, Scott. You can always do that as you finish the diagram and things are more settled. The other thing I'm going to put on is a server here, and we're going to put on a web server. So we're now on the server side of things. We've got a web server. We're not going to give that much of a different name. And again, using the quick things, I'm going to select both of these elements, choose the client machine as the template, use the magic of the layout ribbon and the alignment panel, and make all selected elements the same height and width. So now I've got that. I can quickly line them up as well. They're lined up. And let's put some things on this web server. So one of the things that I might want to put in is a JavaScript object. Now this time I'm not choosing the client side script. I'm choosing the JavaScript object, and I'll drag that in and drop that on the tool. On the diagram. I'm going to call this we'll call this preferences API. So it's going to act as a location, and we'll give it a JS, a JavaScript code there as well. So I'm going to put that one on there. Now, Scott, the thing is, as I always say when we're doing these models, is that I want people to always think about putting in some text that explains what these things are. So the client machine, let's put some text in for that. We've got that done. We had our web browser as well. It's kind of pretty obvious, but let's put something in for that for people that, are not familiar with perhaps some aspects of this, and our preferences.html page there, and we'll put some notes in for that as well. Takes a little bit of time, but the advantage of it is that people will start to understand the story that you're telling, the narrative that you're creating. So let's do that, and let's put in, one more here where we're looking at this client-side JavaScript so that people don't, really understand what this is about. And let's put in a connection between the client machine, I guess, and the web server. So what we'll do is this: we'll just generically call this TCP/IP. We can get more specific about, protocols if we want to, but let's keep this generic. So Scott, that's the beginning of the diagram. We've got a lot more things to do. We've, got an application server and a database server to be putting in, but you can see that we've made quite a good start using the power of the toolbox, the, productivity tools that we've got there to be able to create these things really quite quickly. And we'll get you to perform some magic. I'll complete the diagram in the meantime, and we'll see how this evolves.
Well, Stephen, I can see that we've performed our magic, and we now have a very detailed web model. I think it's fascinating because you can see the client machine, the servers, some of the technologies and web pages sitting on the machine, everything from HTML to JavaScript and much, much more. So what would be the typical audience that might consume and use a model like this?
Great question, Scott, and that's always the most important thing to understand. And really, it's the question that everyone should ask themselves before they start modeling. Modeling is not an inexpensive thing. It takes time to create models, and I can vouch for that because I've been creating models for a very, very long time. And while I've become more experienced and quicker, they still take time to create. The question you asked is a perfect one, because when I start this model, I need to think about the audience that's going to be viewing the model. Now that may be myself. I may be doing something to investigate things myself, and there's no harm in that, but it's important that you realize that you may be the only one that's going to look at the model. In this particular case, this model is incredibly useful for anyone that wants to get a general overview of the kind of components that are involved in dishing out web pages and style sheets and things to a client working on a browser, right through from this client machine, Scott. And if I use the pan and zoom window, I'm going to pan over here a little bit, through past the web server, into an application server, and finally into the database tier. Now, we haven't been very specific. We've deliberately kept this more general. We haven't really talked about, the details of clusters and nodes and all sorts of other things that are probably, very important in the final analysis to be able to start reasoning about and talking about. But we've got a few little hints here. We can see that we've got a MySQL connector between these two things, between the customer preferences service and the customer profile database on the database server. And we've got, a number of other elements in here. We've got JavaScript objects for preferences. We know that there's an API. Now that gives us a bit of a hint that, we're able to use the things that we can access and reuse. So specifically who the audience is, well, it's probably not going to be a manager or a strategy type of person, but anyone below that level, people doing requirements, project managers that are wanting to get an understanding of, what the technologies are, business analysts that have been asked to kind of look at things and perhaps, look at style sheets or the application of them. Web technology people that are looking at creating HTML, that are looking at creating JavaScript or CSS files, so cascading style sheets that render the page in a particular way. And it starts asking questions too, Scott, like we haven't defined, what the client machine is. We haven't talked about the web browser, but it starts to open up those questions. And, people can look at the notes and say, the user interface contains that hosts and runs the client-side components of the application. So it asks the question like, what browsers are we going to support?
Yes.
You know, what versions of those browsers?
And
you know,
perhaps someone within the city council that needs to provision web servers and application servers might look at this diagram and think, well, I actually might need to either purchase space on a cloud or make some purchases to support this underlying infrastructure. So
yeah, that's right, Scott. And like I said, this is a general purpose diagram. They might start asking questions, and then that might trigger someone to say, hey, you know, we need to push this further from a kind of logical thing into a more physical or virtual representation. So we might be deciding in the end to run these things on some sort of virtualized or some cloud-based structures, whether it's AWS web services or whether it's Azure or Google. But you know, it will start to encourage people to ask those questions. But it gives people a general idea of the things that are going on, including the authentication, which of course is a really important thing in terms of privacy. Once again, Scott, I can use the pan and zoom window to move around this diagram, and you can see that if I go to the notes window, you know, these things have all got notes in them. So once again, encouraging people to start telling the story, to create the narrative. It doesn't take that much time, but adds a great amount of value to people that are looking at the diagram. I can use the pan and zoom window, but once again, this diagram is orientated in a landscape fashion. So I can use my friend the portals window and the workspaces portal, and I can say, look, let's put this into wide view. So selecting that core workspace, wide view, and you can see now that the diagram has gone into that view. Yeah, and you can see the entire diagram, and I can, you know, wind that back a little bit as well using my control keys. And there you have the whole diagram. And if someone was presenting this, you can see that whole diagram in one hit. So
I take it that this story, you can use Enterprise Architect to present in a boardroom or in a meeting room to get some of those ideas happening and get people asking the right questions.
Yeah, exactly right, Scott. So I could put this thing into like a presentation style mode here where I'm using a color. I've clicked on the layout ribbon, the helpers panel, and this presentation checkbox, and that allows me just to move between particular elements, and that focuses people who may not be familiar with all of these types of elements and say, look, what we're talking about is here the preferences.css, and that's the style sheet that's creating all of that information.
That certainly draws people's attention to a particular element and allows you to follow up on that narrative and tell a story, which is very important in a business context.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. The other quick thing to mention, as always, is that we've got a web model legend here, which is actually driving the colors on the diagram. And what I can do is I can find that element in the browser by using this little find context item, and that shows me that that's where it is. And what I can do is to enable people to be able to reuse this legend on their own models, I can put it up into the libraries section of the Urban Parking System repository. So I've got a libraries package, and it's got a number of sub packages, one of which is legends. And if you look in this, you can see that we've got an Ericsson Penka legend, a status legend, a phase legend, and a rules model legend. And I can make this available to other modelers in other parts of the repository just by simply dragging that up and dropping it into that package. I can change the location by using the little arrow keys and say, I want to put it down a little bit further because the phase legend and the status legend are more common to use. But if anyone else was creating a diagram and they wanted to apply that legend, they could simply drop that legend on to their diagram and the colors would be updated automatically by Enterprise Architect.
And that's what I like about Enterprise Architect. It's so easy to reuse objects and elements and save time, because if it's already been modeled and designed, you can simply reuse it.
Yeah, that's right, Scott. And it comes up commonly when people are doing project work. They often are creating models, and they could be any type of model from a strategy model, a business process model, a application portfolio model with connections between interfaces that are connecting particular applications to other applications. They create valuable collateral that other people can use. And so there's a process that you can think about, that you're promoting the things that you created at a project level that might be universally applicable at an enterprise level and across many different types of projects. The example of the legend is a very, very simple example of that much, much greater kind of principle of promoting things up from a project level up to the enterprise level and then being able to reuse them.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Well, thanks, Stephen, for showing us the web model and showing us how you can model the various technologies and servers and nodes and display them in a nice, convenient format. It's really, I could see how powerful this could be if you're developing web-based applications, and in particular for our urban parking application. It's really quite good because you can drill down into all of these technologies, which can in turn be linked to requirements and to documents and to class diagrams and much, much more the further you start modeling. Well, for all of our audience, please like, comment, and subscribe these videos on the Sparx Systems YouTube channel. We love hearing your feedback. If you want to reach out to Stephen, he has a great deal of expertise around modeling and designing diagrams and creating models in Enterprise Architect. So his contact details and LinkedIn details are listed in the description below. As always, thank you very much, Stephen, for your expertise and your time and your effort and energy today. Great to hear from you.
Scott, always delighted to be sharing knowledge